Picture this. You're in the middle of labor, experiencing the most intense pain of your life, bringing your first child into the world, and your husband steps out to take a work call. 20 minutes later, your sister walks into the hospital room with tears in her eyes and her phone in her hand. She shows you a screenshot that changes everything. It's your husband's dating profile, active just 10 minutes ago, with a new message to a woman saying he's recently single and looking for something real. The same man who promised to love you in sickness and health is literally shopping for your replacement while you re-giving birth to his child. This is the story of the most devastating moment of what should have been the happiest day of my life. My name is Maria, and I'm a 29-year-old nurse from Phoenix. 2 years ago, I married James, a 32-year-old real estate agent who swept me off my feet with his charm and apparent devotion. We met through mutual friends at a barbecue, and he pursued me relentlessly for months. He seemed like everything I'd been looking for: ambitious, funny, and eager to build a life together. James proposed after 8 months of dating with a beautiful ring and a speech about how he could imagine his future without me. We had what I thought was a fairy tale wedding, surrounded by family and friends who kept commenting on how perfect we were together. Everyone said James looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. Our first year of marriage felt solid. We bought a house together, adopted a rescue dog named Benny, and started talking about starting a family. James was supportive when I decided to switch from working in pediatrics to labor and delivery nursing. He said he loved how passionate I was about helping families during such important moments. When I got pregnant last year, James seemed genuinely excited. He came to most of my doctor appointments, helped me set up the nursery, and would talk to my belly every night before bed. He read pregnancy books and downloaded apps to track the baby's development. To everyone around us, including me, he appeared to be the perfect expectant father. But looking back now, there were subtle changes I didn't recognize at the time. James started working longer hours, claiming the real estate market was particularly busy. He'd come home later and later, always with explanations about client meetings or property showings. His phone, which used to sit openly on counters and tables, suddenly became something he guarded more carefully. He also began making small comments about how I looked during pregnancy. Nothing cruel or obvious, but little remarks about how I should try to bounce back quickly after the baby came, or how he hoped I wouldn't be one of those women who let themselves go. At the time, I chalked it up to typical expectant father nervousness, but these comments planted seeds of insecurity that would later make sense. As my due date approached, James's behavior became increasingly suspicious, though I was too focused on preparing for our baby to fully process what I was seeing. He started taking more phone calls outside or in another room, always claiming they were work-related. When I'd ask about his day, his stories seemed vaguer and less detailed than usual. 3 weeks before my due date, my sister Carmen noticed something that I'd been too trusting to catch. She pointed out that James had been unusually active on social media, posting photos of himself at various locations around the city, but never including me anymore. When she mentioned it, I realized that in the past few months, James had essentially erased me from his online presence. I decided to look more closely at his social media activity. What I found was troubling, but not definitively damning. James had been liking and commenting on photos of women I didn't recognize, using flirtatious language that made my stomach turn. When I confronted him about it, he brushed it off as being friendly and accused me of being paranoid due to pregnancy hormones. 2 weeks before labor, Carmen made an observation that chilled me to the bone. She'd been at a restaurant with friends and saw James having what looked like an intimate dinner with a woman she didn't recognize. When she mentioned it to me, James explained it away as a business dinner with a client, but something about his explanation felt rehearsed and hollow. The week before I went into labor, James's phone habits became even more secretive. He started taking it with him to the shower, keeping it face down during meals, and stepping outside to take calls, even when he was just talking to his mother. When I asked if everything was okay, he'd get defensive and turn the conversation back to my paranoia and trust issues. I started having trouble sleeping, not just because of pregnancy discomfort, but because I was lying next to someone who felt like a stranger. The man who used to share everything with me had become guarded and distant. I found myself questioning every interaction, every explanation, every moment of affection that now felt forced or performative. The night before I went into labor, James came home unusually late from what he claimed was a last-minute showing to potential buyers. He seemed distracted and kept checking his phone throughout dinner. When I tried to talk to him about my nervousness about the upcoming birth, he seemed barely present, giving distracted responses while his attention clearly remained elsewhere. That night, as I lay in bed next to my husband, I had the horrible realization that I felt completely alone. Here I was, about to give birth to our first child, and the person who should have been my closest support felt like a stranger, who was tolerating my presence rather than sharing this monumental experience with me. The morning my contractions started, James seemed almost annoyed by the timing, as if labor was inconveniencing his schedule. He kept checking his phone while I was timing contractions, and when I asked him to focus on what was happening, he accused me of being dramatic and controlling. Labor started at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. By the time we got to the hospital, I was already in active labor, and the pain was more intense than anything I'd ever experienced. James seemed anxious, but not in the way I'd expected. Instead of being worried about me or the baby, he seemed distracted and kept checking his phone despite the hospital's policy about devices in the delivery room. 4 hours into labor, when I was experiencing the most intense contractions, James announced that he needed to step outside to take an important work call. Through my pain, I managed to tell him that this wasn't the time for work, but he insisted it would only take a few minutes and that it was urgent. Against every instinct I had, I let him go because I was too focused on managing the pain to fight with him. 20 minutes passed, then 30. I was approaching the pushing stage, and my husband was nowhere to be found. The nursing staff kept asking where he was, and I had to keep explaining that he was handling a work emergency. Even in my labor-induced haze, I could see the concerned looks they exchanged with each other. That's when Carmen arrived. She'd driven straight from work to be with me during delivery, knowing how important this moment was. But the expression on her face when she walked into the room wasn't joy or excitement. It was horror and rage. She approached my bedside hesitantly, holding her phone in her trembling hand. Through my contractions, I could see she was struggling with whether to show me something. Finally, she made the decision that would shatter my world, but ultimately save me from living a lie. Carmen showed me a screenshot from a dating app. It was James's profile, clearly active and recently updated. His main photo was one I recognized from a work event just 2 months earlier. His bio read, "Recently single real estate agent looking for something genuine. No games, no drama, just honest connection." But the devastating part wasn't just that the profile existed, it was the timestamp on his last activity. He had been online 8 minutes earlier, right around the time he'd left the room for his work call. While I was in labor with his child, my husband was actively messaging other women on a dating app. Carmen had more screenshots. Messages from that morning where James had told a woman named Ashley that he was free tonight and looking forward to starting fresh. Another conversation where he described himself as basically single and ready to move on from a complicated situation. The room started spinning, and not from the labor pains. I realized that my husband hadn't just been emotionally absent during my pregnancy. He had been actively planning his exit while I was preparing to bring our child into the world. The work calls and late nights weren't about real estate at all. They were about building relationships with other women while his pregnant wife waited at home. In that moment, lying in a hospital bed during the most vulnerable experience of my life, I understood that I wasn't just losing my husband, I was discovering I never actually had him at all. The man I married, the father of my child, had been treating our family like an obligation he was planning to escape. I gave birth to my daughter Isabella 30 minutes later, with Carmen holding one hand and a nurse holding the other. James walked back into the room just as Isabella was being placed on my chest, acting as if nothing had happened and expecting to step seamlessly back into the role of devoted new father. The moment he tried to touch our daughter, something inside me snapped into clarity. This man had been shopping for my replacement while I brought his child into the world. He didn't deserve to pretend to be a loving husband and father when he already checked out of our family before our baby even arrived. I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I spent the next 2 days in the hospital documenting everything Carmen had found, taking screenshots of his dating profile activity, and consulting with a lawyer my sister had contacted. During those 2 days, James continued acting like nothing had happened, posting photos of our new family on social media, while simultaneously updating his dating profile with new photos. The most heartbreaking part was watching him hold Isabella, knowing that he'd already emotionally abandoned her before she was even born. He posed for pictures and accepted congratulations from visitors, all while his dating app was pinging with notifications from women he was planning to meet. I confronted James when we got home from the hospital. His reaction was everything I expected and worse. He denied everything at first, then claimed the dating profile was old and he'd forgotten to delete it. When presented with time-stamped evidence of his activity during my labor, he shifted to blaming me, saying I'd become difficult during pregnancy and he'd needed an outlet. The divorce papers were filed 3 weeks later. James fought for custody, not because he wanted time with Isabella, but because he didn't want to pay child support. During the custody proceedings, more evidence emerged of his infidelity throughout our entire marriage. The dating app was just the tip of the iceberg. He'd been having affairs for over a year. The experience taught me that betrayal doesn't always look like what you expect. James didn't leave me for another woman or have a dramatic affair that exploded our marriage. Instead, he systematically dismantled our family while pretending to participate in it, planning his escape while I was building our future. What haunts me most isn't that my marriage ended, it's that my daughter's birth, which should have been the most beautiful day of our lives, was tainted by her father's betrayal. While I was bringing life into the world, he was ending the life we'd built together. But here's what I learned. Sometimes the most devastating moments reveal the most important truths. That day in the hospital, while my world was falling apart, I also discovered a strength I didn't know I had. I realized that I deserved better than someone who would shop for my replacement while I was giving birth to his child. Isabella is now 8 months old, and she's thriving with a mother who refused to accept betrayal as normal. James sees her every other weekend, and I then learned that some people are capable of loving their children, but not capable of loving their partners with the same loyalty and commitment. The question I'm of isn't why James did what he did. It is why I ignored so many red flags for so long. How many other women are married to people who are secretly planning their exit while going through the motions of commitment? If you're feeling like something is off in your relationship, trust that instinct. Don't let anyone convince you that your concerns are paranoia or hormones or overthinking. Sometimes the person sleeping next to you is already gone. They just haven't told you yet. And if you're going through something similar, remember this. You deserve someone who chooses you every single day, especially during the most vulnerable moments of your life. Don't settle for someone who treats your love like a placeholder while they search for something better.